All right, so let's talk about XSLT. So XSLT is going to allow us to do transformations between XML documents, right? As I mentioned earlier, it's very common that the data representation and the schema between various enterprises that are trying to integrate amongst themselves, right? That the data representation might be slightly different, right? You might spell product one way. You might be using clients where I'm using customer, right? And you might be using first, last, and middle initial, where I might be using first name, last name, right, and middle in my own data model, right? And maybe you have on your side, you have done a really good job at normalizing your data structure, whereas I haven't, right? I have a very denormalized representation, and we need to be able to convert these representations, vice versa. So if we intend to be able to exchange data amongst ourselves. So obviously you can do this programmatically. You can just have a constructor that parses your XML document, and then the constructor can then just peruse through that data model, right, and convert it into my own data model. I mean, I could certainly do that programmatically, but here we're going to explore XSLT. XSLT is a non-programmatic, right? It's a declarative implementation, right? That is going to be able to declare, saying, "Hey, if you get this XML document, I would like you to extract all these pieces in these different portions of the XML document and recreate a new XML document that has a different structure." Okay. Maybe yours is very normalized, and I want to convert into a more denormalized representation, or vice versa, from a denormalized into a more normalized, right? And in the process, maybe rename a couple elements, rename a couple of attributes, maybe do some computation on the side. So let's take a look at XSLT. Again, it stands for Extensible Stylesheet Language Transformation, and it's a declarative programming solution. So let's take an example at this very normalized XML document, right? We have the graduating students that might be graduating for 2009, and we have any number of students in there. We have Ian, we have Ben, Alice, Bob, with Charlie. They're all in here, right? And they're all being represented with this student elements, right? Each one will have its own student elements. It's got the name, the graduation year, and also all the courses that Ian and Ben and Bob, they took when they were enrolled in this university. So we might want to convert that into a more denormalized representation. So how do we do that? So the way we do that is that we can define an XSLT style sheet. So a style sheet, right, that can read this incoming XML document and transform it into a different XML document. So the way we do that is that we use XSLT. So XSLT style sheets, right, they are themselves XML documents. So it's an XML document that's going to be used to convert another XML document to generate yet another XML document. So there's 3 XML documents in play here, right? There's the input XML document. There's a transformation XML document, which is going to be used to read the input XML document and generate an output XML document. So 3 documents. Let's focus. So this is the input XML document, right? And let's take a look at declaring a transformation XML document. So the transformation XML documents, they all start with this style sheet root element. Also, you can specify the particular version of the XSLT style document, and also the standard of this XML document. These are they're pretty standard, right? So in here, the way this works is that the XSLT XML document basically defines a number of transformation rules, right? And what that means is that some algorithm is going to parse all these rules, right, from your XSLT document, and what it's going to do is going to say, you're going to be telling me that what to watch out for, meaning what to expect from the input XML document, and what do you want me to do with it, right? This is somewhat equivalent if you've done any CSS styling in HTML. CSS is it's a little brother of XSLT style sheets, right? In CSS, you can say, hey, if you in the HTML, if you see headers, well, those headers I want to make them all red, right? And you see all those paragraphs over there, well, I want to make them green, right? And what it's doing is the way you do that is you specify transformation rules, saying, hey, if you see this in the original document, this is what the transformation I want you to do, right? I want you to change the font, I want to change the color, the foreground color, background color, how the layout and whatnot. So same thing here. In XSLT document, what you're going to specify are rules that, if you see the following pattern in the incoming XML document, this is what I want you to do, right? This is the resulting transformation that I want you to do. So the way you specify these transformation rules is by declaring these template, right? These template are patterns. You're looking for these patterns, meaning you're saying, go and look for the following in the input document. What are we looking for? We're looking for a tag whose name matches graduating students. And down here, here's a separate rule. We're looking for all the elements whose name of the elements is student. And we have that. If we go back, here's the input document. And indeed, we have an element whose name is graduating students. And we're going to have, there's only one of those, right? There's only one graduating students, right? Because it's the root. There's only one of them. But in the student, right, in the student as nested elements, there's going to be a whole bunch of student elements, right? There's Ian, there's Ben, there's Bob, there's Alice. There's tons of student elements that are going to be in that document. So that means that these two rules are going to fire, they're going to trigger, right? This one, the green one over here, graduating student, is going to trigger only once because there's only one graduating student. Whereas the one at the bottom, that's going to trigger lots of times, right? And it's going to trigger for every single student that it sees in the input XML document. Okay. All right. So let's first focus on the top one. This green, the graduating students rule. So if we look at the graduating student rules, the body of the template is going to contain what we want to generate as an output. So this says that if you see in the input the following element, graduating students, well, in the output document, I want to generate the following content. Right? The following content would be that I want to see a student names element. So presumably, the root element, graduating students, right, is going to be replaced in the new document by a single root element called student names. Okay, that makes sense? Then inside my student names, notice that my student names doesn't have any of this weird XSL colon everybody else has, right? And the reason for that is that notice that we are mixing and matching XML here, right? Some of the XML is some kind of meta XML, right, that allows us to declare these rules, right? And we don't want to confuse them with the XML that we are generating, right? So notice that this student names has nothing prepended in front of it. See that? And that's because they're both XML, but this XML needs to be interpreted in the context that this is an XSL rule, an XSL template. It's not XML that is going to be generated in the output, right? This student names here, since it doesn't have XSL colon in front of it, right? This is interpreted as this is output XML that is being generated in the output XML document, right? As opposed to template here, which should be interpreted in the context of XSL. Okay, so notice that inside here we have an apply templates. This says that in the body of the resulting student names element, what I want to be able to put in there, right, is whatever results of this other rule that is down below here. So notice that this rule down below here is going to be pattern matched against all the student elements that are in the original XML document. What do I do with those transformations? Well, whatever that results of that transformation, I want to put it inside the body, right, of the student names, right? So I'm going to say apply some template that is out there, some other template, which happens to be way down here. So apply and select the student elements. So apply the following template down below. So let's take a look at the template down below. So the template down below says that for every student that matches in the incoming input XML document, I'm going to generate a brand new name element, right? So for every student, I'm going to have, maybe several dozen students, right? We're going to have Ian, Ben, Alice, Bob, blah, 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 blah. For each one of those student elements, right, I'm going to generate in the output XML document, I'm going to generate a name element, right? Again, notice that this name element does not have XSL prepended in front of it, meaning this is a raw XML that's going to be written, right? And now the body of that name, a brand new name element, the body, the value embedded inside of that name element, we're going to retrieve the value of the S name of the students that we are currently in, right? So if we pattern match Ian or we pattern match Bob or Alice or whatnot, right? If you remember, the incoming student, right, has a sub element called S name, right? So we want to reach out into that S name element and retrieve the value of Ian and then put it as the value of our brand new name element, right? So this name here, right, is going to reach out inside of our S name and retrieve the value of Ian, Ben, Alice, Bob, and all those. So this input XML document is going to result into this output document of Ian, Ben, and Tom. That makes sense, right? So there's 3 XML documents. The input. So here's our input. This is the input XML document. We're going to apply this transformation XSLT, and the output is going to be this student names and then name Ian, Ben, and Tom. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so an alternative implementation to this. Now, some folks are taken aback by this syntax, right? And this syntax is rule based, right? These rules are triggering, and notice that there's no particular sequence in which this is occurring. It's not apparent in what order these things are happening, right? And most of us find this somewhat disconcerting. So there is a sequential equivalent to the same exact operation, and it's a for loop, right? And you might find this a little more tasteful, right? Notice that instead of using all these different executing rules, instead we can have a much more sequential implementation of the same exact idea. We have an outer graduating students, right, which is going to generate student names, right? And in there, we're going to for loop iterate over all the students, and these would be the students inside of the graduating students, right? So for every student, we're going to generate a name and then the S name from within that student. Notice that this syntax, most folks find this syntax to be easier to understand, right? Since it's sequential as opposed to rule based.